Good morning, everybody. We're going to just give a minute or so for stragglers to just kind of come in. I will take advantage of this moment, though, while we're waiting, just to thank everyone for being a part of this. This has been absolutely incredible. And I just want you to know that Heather and I have also been at every single presentation, and we're just continue to be blown away. But what's also been equally enjoyable is to see the engagement from all of you and all of the really great questions coming, and the dialogue after the presentations has been absolutely wonderful. So wonderful that we realized we did not pad enough time for things here. And between most segments, Heather and I have had anywhere from, I think, 8 minutes to maybe 15. I think once we might have had a half hour. So it's been as great as it's been really exhausting, but we really, really appreciate everybody, all of your great questions, and all of you just going through all of this with us for these now fourth day that we're on this. So I think I counted this morning, we have 14 more presentations, so that's very exciting. And I am going to get ready to get started. And someone who, again, I've talked about this in a couple of the presentations that I've moderated, people that just fall from the sky into my life, and Jen is absolutely one of those people. She is someone I consider a friend. She is my webmaster who has completely revamped our Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates website and made it incredibly beautiful, and also enhanced it with her own knowledge and just beautiful use of the language. So I'm very excited to have Jen here. Jen also is one of the people that has been helping me and Heather moderate for these 5 days. So we truly appreciate all of her help with that. Um, Again, this isn't easy. It's very early where Jen is, and I think that Heather just said, is it like 6 o'clock in the morning where you are, Heather?
It's 6 o'clock in the morning here on Maui. Yes.
So so I appreciate everyone being here, whatever time it is where you are. And I'm going to introduce Jen. Jen is a journalist and also the founder of Wild Narrative Project. She is an amazing, amazing person, a wonderful advocate, not just for wild horses, but for entire ecosystems. So I'm going to let Jen take over. She's going to talk about op-eds and letters to the editor. And I do want people to know we have started putting the videos on our YouTube channel. And because I did in our blog today have a call to action for letters to the editor, I will make sure that Jen's gets up there today. So welcome back, Jen. Um, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chris. Your words caught me a little bit off guard. So I'm actually a little misty-eyed. It like you said, it is very early here. I'm in California and I am under caffeinated and overly anxious, very anxious person. This is why I write. This is why I'm usually behind a desk. I am still working on my public speaking. So thank y'all for your patience with me this morning. I am so honored to be here. Chris, I would echo what you said about me right back at you. Since I have gotten to know Chris Kaman and the incredibly impactful work that she has been doing through Chasing Horses, Wild Horse Advocates for the last several years, I have really felt a sense of hope for the future of our public lands. That comment and that notion might hit hard for some people right now. I totally get it. I'm in it with you. And that's why we are here today. And that's why I'm excited to talk to you about op-eds and letters to the editor. I also want to thank Heather at Save Our Wild Horses. Thank you so much. I am just getting to know you and really appreciating your camaraderie. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. And we'll get into this, but I too have moderated several presentations and been present for several of them. And what a wealth of knowledge that we're all sharing here today. And I think that this is something really special, everyone getting together to learn together and to move through this issue together instead of separately in silos. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, cool. So today we're going to talk about how you as wild horse advocates and public lands advocates can use letters to the editor and op-eds as strategic tools to advance your cause. Over the next 20, maybe 30 minutes, I'll walk you through a bit of history, some best practices, examples, and some hands-on techniques. My goal is to remove the barrier for any thoughts that would lead you to believe that you can't be a part of taking civic action by writing. Okay, so I'm going to sidestep for a second and just give you a brief background on me. I'm going to try to make it brief. Again, this is why I write, because I can edit myself. Let's see. I grew up in a military family. My mom tells me that my first word was pony, and that when we lived on an air base outside of San Antonio, Texas, when I was about 5 years old and going into kindergarten, she said, "Jen, what do you, now that you're learning and you're around adults, more adults, what do you think you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "Mom, I want to ride around Texas on horseback and pick up trash." And she said, "Okay, so just clarifying." And of course, these are not the words we would use today. But she said, "So you want to be a bag lady on horseback?" I said, "Yes, absolutely. Don't you mess with Texas." That was a big thing in the mid 80s. And I always really cared about the environment, and I always wanted to be near horses. So fast forwarding into adulthood, we had moved to Georgia. So I stayed there. There was a great College of Journalism at the University of Georgia. So I got my degree in journalism with a focus in advertising, which led me down a career path of using my skills in journalism to work for big brands like Athleta, Title IX, Cliff Bar, the Outbound Collective, and I was able to cut my teeth bringing other people along in their writing journeys and also building narratives for big brands. In 2017, I became aware of the wild horse issue. And as I'm sure is the case for everyone here, once you know, and you can't stop digging. So this really, I really leaned in again to my journalism skills. I worked for a brief period of time with the American Wild Horse Campaign, now American Wild Horse Conservation, where I had the opportunity to learn from other people who were further along in the advocacy realm to dig deeper into the issues. And for me, what was most interesting is how the wild horse issue is a microcosm for the greater issues on public lands at large, how private interests are influencing policy against public interest. And that led me to found the Wild Narrative Project. So through this slide up, this would be our mantra at Wild Narrative Project. When change begins with knowledge, storytelling will save what's left of the wild. So the Wild Narrative Project is not an advocacy group. We are a journalism outlet, and we are advocating for an informed public that can then advocate for whatever issue is important to you. What we really want to do is spur civic action. Okay. So today I want to advocate for you to make your voice heard. So we're going to amplify your advocacy, and it's really easy. It takes some practice, but it is not an arduous task. We're going to start with a plan. You're going to have a pen, probably your computer, and you're going to have a pitch. So here's how we're going to structure today's talk. We'll start with a quick historical snapshot of letters to the editor and op-eds. We're going to talk about how they're different, and then we're going to dive into practical tips. We're going to look at a letter to the editor and an op-ed that I wrote, and we'll try to move through that quickly, and we can go back to it in discussion afterward. And I have provided you with a Mad Lib style template that you can use immediately to start writing op-eds or letters to the editor yourself. Okay, so we're going to start with a brief history. I think it's always important to understand the origin of the form of communication that you are participating in. So letters to the editor have been around almost as long as newspapers themselves. In the 1700s and 1800s, they were one of the few ways everyday citizens could communicate with a broader audience, challenging or supporting editorial positions. And this tradition continues, which offers us a concise and potentially powerful format to make our voices heard. And getting ahead of myself. Yay. Here we go. Op-eds started simply as pieces opposite of the editorial page, as often presenting a contrasting view or additional commentary. Over time, they became a platform for experts and advocates, just like you, to share data, personal experience, and calls to action with a wide readership. Okay, so there are a few key differences between op-eds and letters to the editor. Letters to the editor are short and snappy. They're perfect for reacting to a recent story or a hot issue. Op-eds, on the other hand, allow for more in-depth analysis, showing our expertise or a fresh angle on a pressing concern. Both take their place in your toolkit. Okay. So, tips for writing letters to the editor. First of all, I just want to say the best piece of advice that I ever got, as someone who often feels anxious, and even as a very seasoned writer, still worries about making something perfect, wondering if I'm the right person to be participating in an issue. And the answer is always yes, participate. So the best piece of advice given to me was just start. If you can write furiously and just get your thoughts out to start with, you can always throw away your first pass, your first draft, but just start. Don't let writer's block or feelings like you don't belong in this space to keep you from taking civic action. So when writing a letter to the editor, be sure to mention the article or the issue that you're responding to. Editors love timeliness, and relevance. So keep it tight. While some places will allow up to 250 words, fewer words can make a big impact. Use a clear tone, slip in a compelling fact, and wrap it up with a simple but strong point or call to action. So this is going to get a little messy, but we're going to dive in. I hope that you can see this. I had a little bit of trouble making the font big enough, but I'm going to read it anyway. So this was years ago. I had just stepped into working with American Wild Horse Campaign, and I was in my Aries mode. I was fiery. I was fired up. I had all of the things to say, and I was still learning on this issue to hone my words and to be clear and concise. So an opinion piece had just come out through a student, probably at the University of Utah. And I was really upset about it. And our team, our communications team, which at the time was led by Grace Kuhn, who, if you know her, she's spectacular and one of the most articulate people to speak to the wild horse issue. She helped me out with this. So I wrote, in response to the January 4th opinion by student Sage Bowen, wild Mustangs need to be managed, not saved. We contribute science-based evidence for consideration instead of sweeping, unsubstantiated suggestions. Refer to the National Academy of Sciences 2013 Comprehensive Report. The entire report is available to the public. We'll paraphrase. I should sidestep here for a second and again say, yes, I was very heated. I don't always recommend that you come with this much heat, but this got published, so there is merit to that. So again, here, that first paragraph, I'm referencing the article. Second paragraph, first, how AMLs, we all know AML, appropriate management level, the wild horse population limits imposed by BLM are established, monitored, and adjusted is not supported by scientific information. Yet, AML numbers are used by powerful private interests as a way to say there's an overpopulation of wild horses on federal lands. This, despite the fact that horses inhabit just 12% of federal rangelands and are outnumbered on these lands nearly 50 to 1 by livestock. So I'm being as concise as I can. This is going to be a challenge for the wild horse issue because, as you know, or as you have learned through all of the spectacular presentations in this summit, there's a lot to say. So one of your challenges is going to be being concise. I'll keep going. The reality is, outnumbered by thousands of cattle grazing Utah public land at taxpayers' expense, Onakee wild horses thrive. Second, tools, including PZP fertility control, already exist for BLM to address many challenges in wild horse population management. Furthermore, the NAS confirms BLM is not using these solutions in a manner that will impact population growth. And fertility control costs pennies compared to roundups. The true underlying problematic belief, which is what Bowen had written in her piece, is one of ignorance, as the author demonstrates with her blind regurgitation of a convenient narrative driven by big money commercial industry. Okay, so again, I came in hot. So if we back up, when I wrote the reality, outnumbered by thousands of cattle on public land at taxpayers' expense, Onakee wild horses thrive. This is me being very clear. You have to figure out a way to make your statement with few words. And we can talk about a little bit more how to do that in a minute. I ended with a very pointed takeaway. Again, looking back at this, I think, whoo, I was a little hot here. But again, it was published, it was correct. I'm still sitting with this as I look back. But I think letters to the editor do naturally come from a place of passion or a place of having a strong perspective or information that is being underreported that you're trying to share. So this is where we landed. And I wanted to make another point here, but I'm going to continue. Okay. We're going to move into op-eds, which we know are longer, and these are an opportunity for you to showcase your expertise or your heartfelt experience. So you want to start with a hook, an emotional or surprising opener. You want to establish your credibility, but you want to be brief about it. You want to support your argument with data or personal observations and close strong with a concrete solution and a call to action. You have to remember with an op-ed, with a strong op-ed, an op-ed that is more likely to be published, it isn't just about the problem, it's about being a part of the solution. Okay, this is long. We're doing okay on time, so I'm going to go ahead and read. So this is an op-ed that I had published again during a similar time frame. I think this was the beginning of 2020 in the Reno Gazette-Journal. And I started with a question. Why do our tax dollars pay to chase wild horses to death? Last August, in Wyoming's Red Desert, across approximately 700,000 acres of public land federally designated as a wild horse habitat, the Bureau of Land Management conducted what it refers to as a wild horse roundup. Using low-flying helicopters, government employees chased wild horses away from their high desert homes and into captivity. For miles upon miles in the grueling summer heat, the horses fled the helicopter, only to be corralled into crowded pens, leaving their freedom behind them in a cloud of dust. During this particular high-speed chase, a foal was unable to keep up with his mother as their herd fled into terror. Over the miles and miles of heat, he was exhausted. It was 94 degrees outside, legal to conduct the capture by only 1 degree. Eventually, his mother realized he was no longer at her side, and so she bravely turned back to find him. When a wrangler circled back for the pair, the mother valiantly faced off against a helicopter to defend her baby, who had at that point stopped moving altogether. Both eventually were captured. The mother was led away from her bone-tired foal and into the trap. With no energy left to run away, the foal was lassoed and led into the crowded corral. The next morning, the tiny black foal was dead. He was curled into a tiny heap on the bare dirt. An observer was told he'd been checked out by a vet, doused with water because he was clearly overheated, and then essentially left to die. This isn't an isolated case. It isn't even rare. Roundups like this happen across the Western Range, including Nevada. I mentioned including Nevada because as I was referencing something happening in Wyoming, I needed to bring it back for the outlet that I was trying to get published in. Including Nevada, summer through winter each year. Thousands of horses are chased violently by helicopters into captivity in already overcrowded corrals to await a fate that, even in 2019, could end in slaughter. Perfectly healthy Mustangs, young and old, and all ages are in between, are susceptible to injury, illness, and death due to the brutal, unnatural tactics involved in capturing them by the thousands. It's literally shocking. During the Red Desert Roundup last August, 10 horses died. 6 of them were tiny foals. Several perished from what's known as capture myopathy, which we have heard about in some other presentations, which is death by extreme stress or exertion. Translation, they were run to death. Others died from broken limbs. The horses were just babies. In Nevada, the first roundup of the year begins July 8th in the Triple B herd management area. They'll chase and capture 800 horses, and to the shock and outrage of many Americans, we'll pay for this with our taxes. The American Wild Horse Campaign works to change these cruel and inhumane policies and hold the BLM accountable. There's a better way with proven methods to preserve and humanly manage our nation's iconic wild horse populations. While the justification of wild horse roundups will never be acceptable, needless deaths for the most vulnerable, like this in the case of the Red Desert, can be significantly reduced. For starters, veterinarians stationed on site at the roundups should be provided with emergency foal kits, which include a small nasogastric tube and funnel, electrolytes, and milk replacer to help counteract myopathy. This suggestion actually originated with an animal and plant health inspection service vet reporting after a roundup in Oregon last summer. Likewise, since millions upon millions of taxes already pay for umpteen yearly wild horse roundups, the least the BLM could do is offer basic wellness protocol while they're at it. Foal kits, for instance, are packed with essential supplies to prevent foals from suffering and death, and they cost just a few $100. Stories like this one shouldn't be common, but until we demand change, broken government policy deems wild horse deaths are normal. Foals shouldn't die this way, but they do. The public needs to know the gory details at the end of their tax dollars, and they need to know they can do something to change the fate of our greatest symbols of freedom, America's wild horses. We ask the American people to join AWHC in reforming this entire inhumane program that brutally subjects wild horses to trauma and strips them of their freedom, if not their lives. With another season of roundups just days away, we will be watching BLM's actions and will demand humanity for the agency allocating our dollars and the treatment of majestic Mustangs of the West. Ooh, buddy. Okay, so that is the op-ed that I wrote, and I'm just going to go back here and talk about a couple of things. So we were talking about our tips. I'm going to go back one more slide. So you want to start with a hook, which I did here. I start with the hook of painting a picture. I tried to paint a vivid picture of what was happening. Considering the publication, the Reno Gazette-Journal, there are going to be a large number of people who know that there are wild horses. It's a Western publication. It's in Nevada, where there are the most wild horses out of all of the Western states. But people might not know what's happening across the Western states because they're in Reno or they're local, and they might not know just how violent and widespread these roundups are. So I started with that vivid picture. I'm going to go back. I established credibility, which I think I started to do where I talk about being with American Wild Horse Campaign, which at the time and certainly now is one of the biggest wild horse advocacy groups. I supported with evidence. So we talk in the here in the op-ed about, let me get to the second paragraph. Well, we talk about this not being an isolated incident. We're talking about Triple B, which is coming up, and we're talking about the evidence of this suggestion of foal kits, where it was actually a suggestion coming from an animal and plant health inspection service vet. So we're establishing credibility here. So the solution that I propose towards the end is actually a solution provided by an expert. So that's how I was establishing credibility. I offer the clear solution. Hey, there's this foal kit. If the operations like this are going to continue, this is something that costs pennies compared to the budget that the BLM is already spending on the Roundup system, and this will help prevent wild horse deaths, which is an outrage to the public. And then I close with that clear call to action, which I say here and again, at the time I was with AWHC. So we ask people to advocate for reforming the inhumane program. And we are letting BLM know that we are watching, that we are going to be holding them accountable. Okay, so that was a long time ago. There are things that I would do to improve that op-ed, but as we will get to, I want to advocate for y'all. Just write, just get it out there. We're going to talk about some best practices that will help you decide when your op-ed is ready to go. But I want to encourage you to don't be held back by the idea of perfection. I've said that a couple of times, but I really can't get that point across enough. Okay, I'm going to give you one last piece of advice, and this is going to come probably as a surprise. When I started writing op-eds back in the 20-teens, one of the things that made me feel nervous is I thought, okay, I'm going to write this, and then some bully's going to come in and knock down my advocacy. They're going to make me feel like I don't have enough information, like advocates are just crazy extremists, which, if you've been in the advocacy realm for a while, you'll know that because everybody wants to confirm their own bias, we all inevitably are looking for ways to prove our point and potentially to knock down someone else's point. And we also know that once you've published in a magazine, in a newspaper, once you've published on social media, people will come in and make comments because they can do so anonymously. They can knock you down, and they're going to say whatever they want to say. So what I call the M&M effect is about Marshall Mathers. This is about the rapper, Marshall Mathers, excuse me. One of the things that I like to do when I write a letter to the editor, but certainly with an op-ed, is you want to win the battle of words by accounting for your opponent's argument. So there's this fantastic scene in this movie 8 Mile that is decades old at this point. And I can't see anyone's faces, but I'm hoping somebody's nodding their head. A few of you may be shaking your head with disgust. That's okay. This is still relevant. So the basis of the scene is that this character based on Eminem, the rapper, is having a rap battle with a dueling rapper. And these two are, we all have kind of an idea of the nature of rap, and certainly some of its points in history where this was an opportunity for people from marginalized communities to raise their voice. And so oftentimes the subject matter can be really hard to hear, and it's really passionate. And so in this scene, Eminem's character has, he comes from nothing. He's had a really rough upbringing, and his dueling rap partner, stay with me, his dueling rap partner in all of the first rounds of this rap battle, all this guy has done is put Eminem down. You grew up here, your mom, blah, blah, blah. I chose not to show the clip because of the number of expletives, but I'll throw a link in the chat for anybody that's interested. So the point I'm getting at is Eminem had heard all of his character had heard all of the bad things about him, and he knows that that's going to come in the final round. He expects at this point that somebody is going to try to dismantle his rap by poking holes in everything that he says. So he goes on in his final rap, and instead of battling against the other person, instead of poking holes in his the guy that he's rap dueling against, he thinks the only way I can win this is by going ahead and pointing and poking holes in my own life, in what I know this other guy is going to say about me, so that when this other guy comes to do his rap battle, he has nothing left to say, because I've already said all of the things. And so that's what I want. That's what I call the Eminem effect. So putting that in practice for wild horse advocacy. Thanks for hanging with me. So what we could do is, you may say at some point, let's say you are you're writing about the number of livestock that are currently grazing the land where these wild horses are federally designated to be. And you're arguing that the wild horses shouldn't be removed because of the number of cattle that are still grazing. So a common argument, the way that people kind of beat back that position, is by saying, but cattle ranchers feed America. This is a way of life. Okay, totally understood the way of life, but feeding America isn't the case. So what you might do is think about a way that you can provide a statistic and go ahead and get in front of, like the Eminem effect, get in front of that argument. So you might say, no doubt people will try to, will have the rebuttal, or people will try to comment that that livestock ranching in the West is feeding America. But the actual numbers, and you can say, according to, it might be Western Watersheds, it might be a paper, it might be the Office of Government Accountability. You say, actually, public lands ranching feeds less than 2%, or is accounts for less than 2% of the beef supply in America, something like that. So I'll keep it there. We can talk about that if you want to go back in discussion. And if not, if you're all just like, I don't know why this person is bringing up a rapper, that's cool too, but I stand by my point. Okay. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, I'm breaking this down really easily. So this is a quick Mad Lib style outline that'll get you started. All you have to do is fill out each section with your own content. So you're going to start with a shocking or emotional hook. You're going to clearly state your argument. You're going to show why you're credible. You're going to present evidence. You're going to handle a counter argument, which is, again, that Eminem effect. And then you're going to lay out a solution and end with a strong call to action. So what I'm going to do is, this will be in the presentation, but I'll also provide a one-sheeter in the form of a Google Doc, and I'll leave it with Chris and Heather, so that'll be available quickly in case after this summit you are understandably riled up and you want to go ahead and take civic action. And I want to end with a few universal best practices. Again, always do your research when you are sending a quick letter or a detailed op-ed. You always want to check with the publication's guidelines. This is really going to be helpful in the beginning, whether you're submitting with a paper that's super local, the Reno Gazette, High Country News, San Francisco Chronicle. Go ahead and research what the word limit is going to be, and if the editor gives you any more advice on submission. Proofread more than once. This is really important. This is important for everyone. Even if you're a seasoned writer, have someone else proofread for you. There are free tools. And at this point, I even think you can probably just pop, if you have a Gmail account, or even just making sure it's in Word, you'll catch a lot of your mistakes by running through your program's spell check and editor. With AI, you can even use free AI tools that are available through Grammarly, or again, your email provider, your Gmail email provider, to help make sure that you are spelling correctly, that your sentence structure makes sense. I want to pause here while we're talking about AI. And I just want to say that I do recommend getting familiar with AI. I think that that is still scary to some or a lot of people. I do not recommend having AI write a piece for you. I do not recommend using AI to verify your resources or even to research for you. I do currently use ChatGPT for some things. Never trust its resource. Never trust a quote that it provides you. If it provides you with a link or even says, according to so-and-so, you need to do your own research to double fact check that before considering it truth. Okay. Timing is everything. A news hook can drive acceptance. So again, like, don't sit on it too long. Get your computer out and just start writing. Don't hold yourself to a high standard. Just start writing for that first pass. Keep your language accessible. Speak conversationally. Speak as you would speak as a human. I think robotic letters to the editor and op-ed submissions are really boring. I myself, as an editor, when I see a submission that uses language where I can tell, for instance, where I can tell that someone's from a different part of the country, someone that may use y'all, someone that you just don't worry about being grammatically correct in the elementary school sense. You can use slang. You can you want to be you still want to sound intelligent, but don't take your personality out of the letter to the editor. These are meant to be passionate pieces. So keeping language accessible, don't feel like you need to find the biggest word or the most complicated word or the most scientific word always to back your argument. And finally, don't be shy about politely following up if you haven't heard back. This is something that I learned through experience. Because I have a background in editing, I have a habit of not wanting to press someone through email, but that's what you've got to do in order to get your piece seen. So as a best practice, what I often do is I will submit a piece at 8 a.m. And then if I haven't heard back from that editor by the next morning, let's say 9 a.m., go ahead and follow up, especially if this is a really timely situation. So if, going back to what Chris and Theodore Roosevelt National Park advocates are dealing with, if the park is threatening to remove horses next week, you've got to press your editors. And you can be polite and say, gently, gentle nudge on this. This is very timely and important. If the so-and-so journal would like to pass, I need to take this elsewhere to get my point of view published. Thank you so much for your understanding. Yes, don't sit on an op-ed for a week without hearing back. You can move it along after, even if you're feeling shy after 48 hours, go ahead and check in. And if you don't hear back, I'd give it another 24 hours and then move that piece along. But generally speaking, you would not, and I did not put this in here, but generally speaking, do not submit an op-ed to 5 different publications at the same time. That is not proper etiquette. So you just want to publish in one at a time. If you had enough gumption and you wanted to write a completely different op-ed with completely different words and a slightly different hook, you can submit elsewhere at the same time, but give the editor and the publication the benefit of the doubt to get to it and decide whether they want to publish or reject. Finally, on that note, do not take rejection as oh, I'm a bad writer. Oh, they don't care about it. I have had a handful of op-eds published in the last 10 years. Not to say that I'm writing them every day or even every month, but I've had just as many rejected or, just crickets where I haven't heard anything back. So there's that. As far as in closing, remember that these letters to editors and op-eds can be some of your most powerful tools as an advocate. If you want more in-depth guidance, this resource, the op-ed project, which you see here on the left, and I noted the website. This, as I was researching and preparing this presentation, I went back to the op-ed project. I think it was one of the first resources that I used when I was cutting my teeth on this sort of civic action, and it deserves more than a mention. It's an organization compiled of journalists and activists, especially from marginalized communities, doing work within marginalized communities and in really tough subjects, and their resources are highly valuable and easy to understand and follow. I would also recommend using what you have learned and all of the information that's going to be available after this summit to take action. I think that's going to be a timely resource and is going to help a lot of people. If you finish with this summit and you're still feeling fired up, that's going to be the time to start writing. Even if you don't submit, just give it a try. Because I think keeping that muscle stretched and awake is going to be important. So don't forget to tap into the guidelines that each newspaper or publication provides, and just keep writing, submitting, and speaking up for what is important to you, which in this case are wild horses and public lands. Because if we're not speaking up, who else is going to do it? So you've got this. You have my email address, and you have the web address of the Wild Narrative Project, and feel free to contact me at any point. And that's that.
Oh my God, Jen, I think I love you more. So first of all, there were a couple moments where I was laughing, just seeing myself and going, oh my God. So first of all, are you an Aries?
I'm not an Aries, but I'm drawn to Aries. My partner is an Aries. My sister is an Aries. And I am so familiar with Aries energy that sometimes I just have to channel it, because I myself am a Virgo for anyone that's in horoscope. And so we lean towards perfectionism, nurturing, having kind of a calmer, although judgmental voice. And I got to lean into that Aries energy when I'm writing something and trying to be passionate about it.
So I'm a Scorpio, so I was recognizing the Mars energy. So
Yes, yes,
second,
absolutely.
second of all, I am not as big of an Eminem fan as you are, but I have been known to blast Lose Yourself to get myself pumped up.
There
Oh
you
my
go.
God, me too, Chris.
It's powerful. We don't all have to agree with Eminem's the way that he moves through life, but he's very good with words, and I can't deny that.
Third of all, Mad Libs is my absolute favorite thing of all time. I think it is the greatest thing. So when you did that, I was like, I can't even believe it. I want to just add a couple of things and maybe just have a little bit longer of a conversation on things that I found as we've gone through and how important letters to the editor are. Number one, we talked about this, I know, in my presentation. Legislators look at this. I can guarantee you 1,000,000% they look at this. When the stuff happened 3 years ago with Theodore Roosevelt National Park, our legislators told me personally, there was not a day that there was not a letter to the editor in one of our papers in North Dakota, usually multiple, complaining about what the park was doing and the outrage people felt. The legislators seen that, and they knew they had to do something because people were contacting their office, and they not only did something, but they moved the wild horse issue up in the legislative session so they can get it over with and do what they could, so they could move on and get the rest of their work done. We also know, and Holly talked about this, Federal legislators, especially if you tag them in your letters to the editor, they have people who are literally looking to see where their names are being mentioned and with what issues. So this is a lot more than just writing a letter and getting your thoughts out. On top of that, I can say, when there are so many people writing letters to the editor about an issue, you better believe the media gets involved and they're like, hey, this is something the public's interested. We might want to write a story about that. So there are so many reasons to do this. I can't thank you enough, Jen, for doing this. It's so important. And I did like, and I wrote down, this is a civic duty. This is our right to take action and a way for us to do that. So I loved your words there too, Jen. So extremely important letters to the editor and op-eds. And I'm really glad that you did this, Jen. I can't thank you enough. You did a great job. I know you were nervous. So
I was.
let's
Thank you.
let's see. Everybody's saying yes, very informative.
Great. I'm glad.
So a lot of compliments. Heather added in, yes, public land ranching feeds less than 2% of the beef supply in America. So thanks for that, Heather. I'm not a writer and being concise is my biggest issue. Wanted to say thank you for this. It was very helpful. Thank you, Diana. And yeah, if you do write a piece in the coming weeks or months and you ever get anything published, for sure, share it. It when you share things like that, I think that it helps empower other people to see what's possible and what they can get done. I also want to say, and I've advised people to do this, and especially because I know that we get very passionate as wild horse advocates. And I've already told you guys in my presentation, I love Brene Brown. She talks a lot about doing a shitty first draft. So that's where like you write down every swear word that you have to have, call out whatever you want, say things in the most inappropriate way, get it out of your system, and then take the things that you can from that and start writing the real piece that you can. And that's whether it's a comment letter for an EA, a letter to the editor, whatever, but just get that out because sometimes some great pieces will come from that. So
Yeah. And I think there's worth, Chris, if I can interject, I think that there's something to that first draft. I know from experience where that's where your passion comes through. And that's where some of the, if you're writing an op-ed where you're, that really visual or visceral language is going to come through that really drops people into a moment and catches their attention. And then you can kind of back out of it and you can use your checklist and you can say, okay, well, how do I come at this from a place of expertise, or how do I reference expertise? How do I, what's my hook? What's the solution? What's this other thing that I'm going to reference, and make sure that that's fact checked. Then you can back out and start, infusing in your second draft the technical elements that need to be there to really be an authority.
Heather wants to know if you can talk about how important it is to have true facts in your writing and keep your sources handy in case the newspaper writes back and asks for proof of what you wrote.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm going to sidestep. I'm going to make this a slightly bigger conversation. Something that we all have to be very careful about is confirmation bias. And this can be a really big challenge in advocacy, especially when we're in that just learning about something fired up phase. And so what I mean by confirmation bias, if you're not familiar, is digging really hard to find that one piece of information or that one nugget or that one aha, where you get some information and it proves what you were saying. It backs your argument. And so some of that is very real, very well documented, like the damage that livestock are doing on public lands, which I know that Eric Mulvar is going to speak about tomorrow. So using that as an example, what you want to do is, I would look at other reputable scientific, I'm not articulating very well here. Don't don't pull a piece of information that's like, oh, so and so says. Don't pull a third. Don't say the Wild Narrative Project reported that blah blah blah. Go ahead, look in the article that we wrote, find our source, make sure that you've seen it yourself, make sure that you understand it yourself, and copy that source. You can also look at The Intercept. You can look at Western Watersheds Project. Heather, I'm hoping that I'm answering your question, but let me know if I'm not quite getting there. So you want to make sure that you have the original source. I think that's the most important thing. Don't go off of any he said, she said, hearsay. And then I keep a library of my sources on a Google Doc. You can do it on a Word document. You can have a folder where you download different studies to provide a link. And also, it's worth, when you submit your op-ed or letter to an editor, you can submit the body of it, and then you can just at the bottom say, notes, these are my sources, to go ahead and be proactive with whatever editor your op-eds, with whomever's desk your op-eds or your letter to the editor is coming across, so that they know that you've done your research and they don't have to come back and ask you. I think there are also many of the organizations that have presented in this summit. So Chris, I'll use Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates as an example. You have a resource center on your website where people can go and find the original documentation. So again, that would be an instance where you just want to make sure you don't say, oh, Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates says that blah, blah, blah is happening in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. You would look at the original documentation. And you would say, okay, I now have this EA. I now have this park plan. I now have this study that was done by this historian. Does that answer your question, Heather?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I brought it up was I did submit one. It's been a couple years ago now, and I did receive an email back from the editor wanting to know what my sources were. Funny enough, it was blm.gov was my source. But it's important to have those things on hand. It's important to make sure you're using 100% factual information. Do not make anything up. Because as
Right.
wild horse advocates, we're trying to bring facts and science to our issue. So we don't want to make things up. We don't want to over exaggerate. We want to make sure we're being clear and precise in what we're writing.
Exactly. Doubling down on that. Unfortunately, we are in a landscape where, and I was actually talking with Mary Consul about this, who you'll hear from later today or tomorrow. She's going to have a great chat, I'm sure. We were just talking about the kind of connotation around the word advocacy, and how certain people, whether it be BLM leadership or big money, big ag, they will use just the nature of advocacy against us or against you, and say, oh, you're just putting all emotion in it, or you're just a bleeding heart, or I don't know, why don't we all just eat wild horses, which is, I'm sure, going to make stomachs turn. But that's the thing I've heard. And so what we want to do, to your point, Heather, is make sure that we're really buttoned up. Make sure that you're not just coming at it from a place of emotion, but from facts, so that it stands. And we know the value of advocacy. We know that it just means we're supporting, and that we have a point of view that's oftentimes opposite the editorial. And so that's really important. And if you ever have a question, I would say this too. I'm happy to, you've got my email address. If you ever want to email me and say, what do you think about this source? I'm happy to write back. It might take me a little while, write to me, write to Chris, write to Heather, write to someone else that has given you permission to communicate with them. And I think that will be helpful. Don't feel like you have to write in a silo by yourself. Take advantage of this community and work together.
Absolutely. I have a group of friends. Almost every blog that I write, I run it by somebody else to say, like, because in my head, I think it makes sense, right? So I like to talk to other people to say, like, am I coming across clear? Do you understand what I'm saying? Do I need to clarify anything? Even this morning, I wrote an op-ed that's going to go into a paper today, and I was like, hey, Jen, can you look at this and see what you think? So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Even like when we were talking about like the shitty first draft, right? When you get your first thing out there and there's a couple lines you might want to keep. I've asked other friends or advocates, like, does this seem like too much if I say this? And just to make sure that, you know, like you said, you're coming with the fire, but not burning everyone that's reading it. So
Right.
Craig wants to know, what's the difference between an editorial and an op-ed?
Yeah, so editorial is the perspective of the publication or the brand or the entity. So that would be like, I'll use Wild Narrative Project as an example. Our editorial is based on our key issues. So it's exposing corruption and holding power accountable. We're not an advocacy group, we're a news outlet. So someone that could be writing an op-ed, if there was a world where we grew that people were interested in writing op-eds, could be, hey, you're forgetting about rural America. And I don't think that this reporting is balanced. So they would be writing opposite the editorial.
Thank you. Barbara wants to know, what are your feelings on taking published letters to the editor, op-eds, and press releases and putting them into social media sites?
Yeah, that's what they're there for. I think the person that wrote the letter would be happy to have their words shared. I think it's important to credit the person that shared their perspective. So even if they're not on social media, what I would do is in your caption, written by Jennifer Caudill, written by Chris Kaman. Like, I think that that's important. And if you can find that person on social media, you might want to send them a DM and say, I really appreciated your perspective. Do you mind if I share this? And I can't imagine that they would say no, but just giving them that opportunity.
Isabella said, in writing letters to my rep senator, I always have my sister high school English teacher review it. I tend to get over passionate.
That's awesome.
Meme says, letters to the editor need to be in response to an article that was just in the paper or just general commentary.
I think it can be both. I think you, depending on the publication, you'll have more luck with it being in response to something that was just published. But I do think you can write a letter to the editor that is, a short form, an extremely short form op-ed, if you will, just to bring attention to something that publication hasn't covered.
I agree. And like we seen with the Theodore Roosevelt horses, people sending letters to the editor just outraged. I think that the media was covering it, but not as often as people were sending letters, and it just kept it to the forefront, and it let, I mean, everyone across the state know this was an important issue. So it really is, it is so much more than just a simple letter. Not to make anyone nervous or make it like, you need to be more concise or precise. Just people saying their feelings and their thoughts. There were people, honestly, who had not taken, Jen's letter to the editor 101 class that we all just did. I mean, they just wrote their passions and their feelings, and they got published. So it's nothing to be afraid of. Just remember that you're representing yourself and what you feel and you believe. So I think that that's a good rule of thumb. So
Yeah.
yep.
And I would add,
once you start writing one or two, it'll start being easier.
yeah. I would add to that, we were talking about, Chris, in your presentation, and then also in Cynthia's presentation, we were talking about, approaching your legislators. And just remember that it's their job to hear what you're saying and to take your interest as someone of the public in mind, and take it to heart and consider it, and consider your feelings and what you think the solutions are. And editorial, newspapers, magazines, even writing into a producer at a local news network, I would say. Although somebody else is presenting on chatting with the media in that way, perhaps later today or tomorrow. But editors, like, it's our job to have a robust newsroom and to make sure that we're covering the having the conversations that our readership is interested in. And so as long as you are approaching them with respect, and as long as you're not inundating them with the exact same thing day after day, like, you know, literally spamming them with Monday it's this, Tuesday it's this, Wednesday it's this, you know, just give them a break. Editors, it is our job to communicate with our readership and to make sure that the editorial, that what the newspaper is producing is speaking to the conversations that are important to our readership. So it's our job to hear you. You won't always hear back. While narrative, you will. Please email us. Feel free. But you know, with a big publication like, let's say, High Country News, or you know, even Reno Gazette, you may not hear back, but don't take it personally. Editors that are in bigger newsrooms are getting a lot on the daily. And so to that vein, email them the following week. Hey, did you see this? Hey, you can also email them and say, hey, I noticed that you passed on my op-ed. I noticed that you passed on my letter to the editor. This issue is important to me. How can I improve for this publication? Can you give me any advice?
The other thing too, Heather just said it, so thank you, Heather. Michael Standard will be speaking tomorrow. And first of all, if you look him up, he has, from a journalist perspective, again, Jen, like when you look at his credentials, you're like, oh my God. When I asked him to do this, and then when we started talking to our presenters and letting them know, like, you know, you have a half hour, leave time for a Q&A, he was like, I don't even know what you want me to say. And I don't think anyone's going to care. And I'm like, oh, we care. Oh, we care. But Michael also, I want to say, contacted me initially. Like, I didn't seek him out and say, hey, he contacted me because of all of the news that was going on about the horses. So I think that that's going to bring an interesting perspective to just questions to ask him, if nothing else. But look him up. He's got an impressive resume and has thankfully landed here in North Dakota, and is working for a North Dakota News Cooperative, which is a really kind of also unique publication here. So yeah, we tried to get everybody we could. So thank you again, Jen. I don't think that anybody has any other questions. It doesn't look like. I think I got everybody.
Okay, great.
Again, I'm going to try to get this on our YouTube channel today. The uploading and downloading and reloading, it takes time. So I'm going to try to make the most of the time that I'm sitting here in front of the computer watching everyone. So it really was wonderful, and people are going on and saying that. I'm sure you can see it in the chat. So thank you again, and everyone get ready to write some letters to the editor about the Theodore Roosevelt horses. It's in our blog today. So this isn't about just coming here and collecting knowledge. It's taking this knowledge and putting it into action. So so make sure that we're doing that. So thank you again, Jen.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all so much.
And thank you. We'll see you later, Jen, I'm sure.
Yes, you will. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chris. Bye-bye.
Bye.